They showed up at 10:43 a.m. on a Wednesday, right when my coffee hit the sweet spot between hot and legally actionable. Now, I'm a man who enjoys silence, especially when it's mine, on my porch, on land I paid for, with taxes I didn't volunteer for. But silence left the moment I heard boots crunching gravel and what sounded like someone revving a dentist drill on steroids. I figured it was street work, until I saw Karen. Shit. Mirrored shades, clipboard, backup flanking both sides like she was leading a three-person coup, and behind them, some guy in an orange vest carrying bolt cutters large enough to disarm a Jurassic Park fence. Before we dive in, if this story even remotely makes your eyebrows raise, do me a favor, like, drop a comment, and hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear, it ain't fiction, it's federal. Now, this wasn't just any metal box they came for, no sir. This was my federally licensed, military-registered, bolted-down ammo locker. The kind that doesn't just make noise when you shake it, it makes alerts, real-time alerts, straight to the Department of Defense. I tried reason, calm, educated, neighborly. I told Karen what she was touching wasn't a garden-hosed violation, it was a locked structure tied to a defense grid. I even used the words national security. She looked at me like I'd just claimed to be Batman's weekend shift. She raised her clipboard like she was swearing in a witness and said, "Sir, this structure violates Aesthetic Code 3.11b. You were notified. We're seizing it under HOA authority for a DOD-certified container." That's like bringing a spray bottle to a grease fire. I blinked twice, prayed for patience, then watched Orange Vest lean in with the bolt cutters. One snip. One tiny, tinny snip, and the LED on the locker went from silent green to glowing red. A signal pulsed. A server in Virginia lit up. Somewhere in the digital ether, someone's dashboard just screamed breach. Karen, of course, didn't notice. She turned to her board with that face smug enough to fog mirrors. "See? Nothing happened. These veterans always exaggerate." Her buddy even chuckled. I didn't move. Not out of fear, out of fascination. I wanted to see the exact moment when smug turned to shocked. And friends, that moment arrived 15 minutes later when two matte black SUVs rolled down our cul-de-sac like Judgment Day on wheels. They didn't park. They landed. 4 men stepped out, dressed like tax-funded thunder, and didn't say a word before doing a full perimeter sweep. Karen's clipboard hit the ground like her ego fell with it. She tried to speak. "Hi, I'm the HOA president," but didn't get past Prezi before one agent raised a hand and said, "Ma'am, step away from the structure. You've breached protected federal equipment." I was still sipping coffee, still not saying, "I told you so," because why speak when the sky does it louder? One of the officers pulled up surveillance footage on a tablet. Footage that I, by the way, had trouble backed up because I knew one day someone would poke the bear with a broomstick. Karen turned pale as chalk, tried blaming the bolt cutter guy, but the camera said otherwise. She leaned in, she posed, she even took a selfie. A selfie with a government locker. That auto-synced to her HOA cloud. That triggered the real panic, a digital upload of object schematics to an unsecured civilian network. That, folks, is what we call the second alarm, not local, federal. No arrests were made that morning, not yet, but there were names taken, ID checks, and a very long silence between Karen's questions and their answers. The lead agent looked at me, nodded, and said, "You did the right thing, not confronting them. This is exactly why the system exists." I asked what happens now, knowing full well the answer was already unfolding behind Karen's mirrored sunglasses. "Now," the agent said, "we find out who gave her the nerve to act like this." Then they were gone. Like ghosts with radios. Karen? She didn't move for 10 minutes. Just stared at that locker like it had whispered all her secrets out loud. And the best part? She still didn't know what was inside. Not weapons, not ammo, just files, code, and receipts of her. And that's when I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She thought she'd touched a box. What she really did was pull the pin. If you felt even a sliver of justice tingling in your spine, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for the rest, because Karen's just getting started, and next time, she brings a bulldozer. By the next morning, Karen had already flipped the script like she was auditioning for cable news. While I was still sipping the leftovers of my victory coffee, flyers were popping up on doorsteps like dandelions after a storm. The headline? Emergency Safety Meeting, Threat in Our Midst. And if you think that title was subtle, wait till you hear the rest. It accused an unnamed resident, you can guess who, of endangering the neighborhood with military-grade storage, attracting federal surveillance, and, my personal favorite, destabilizing suburban peace. The woman used a stock photo of a rusty grenade as the flyer's background. A grenade, y'all, over a locker that hadn't moved an inch in 3 years and had more federal paperwork attached to it than a nuclear sub. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so stupid. But here's the thing about stupid. It spreads fast, especially when it's dressed up in authority and passed around with a smile. So I showed up to the meeting. I didn't want to, but letting Karen control the narrative unchecked was like giving her a flamethrower and praying she just wants to toast marshmallows. The community center was packed. Folks who normally couldn't be bothered to return HOA emails were sitting on plastic chairs like they were waiting for a courtroom drama to start. Karen stood at the front in her usual command pose, flanked by Dennis, the HOA treasurer, who always looked like he hated both confrontation and fiber. "Thank you for coming," she began, in that sugary tone that usually precedes either passive aggression or a backhanded compliment. "As many of you know, a dangerous incident occurred involving unauthorized military materials." Then she turned her gaze on me like she expected me to confess to building a missile silo next to the swing set. I didn't flinch. I just waited. Karen clicked a remote and brought up a blurry screenshot from the day before, an image of one of the black SUVs parked outside my house. "This is what our neighborhood has become," she said. "A place where federal agents appear without notice, where children are at risk." Someone in the back muttered, "Wasn't it you who brought bolt cutters?" She ignored it. I didn't. I stood up, calm as ever, and held up a printed letter, the official one from the Department of Defense confirming the locker was registered, authorized, and part of an active defense archive. "The only risk," I said, "is people playing cop with a clipboard. The agents didn't come because I'm dangerous. They came because someone broke protocol by trying to cut open a secured container and then took selfies next to it, like she was at Disneyland," Aaron sputtered. Dennis leaned into the mic and added, "But this isn't a military base, it's Maplewood Estates." I nodded. "And Maplewood Estates isn't above federal law." The room shifted. You could feel it. Neighbors who'd been looking at me like I was radioactive now started side-eyeing Karen like maybe, just maybe, they'd hitched their wagon to the wrong horse. But Karen wasn't done. That night, I found out she'd already submitted a report to Homeland Security. A public tip line, no less, described me as an unpredictable individual with access to unknown munitions and military files. She even cut together a video with voiceover narration like she was making a Netflix docu-series. No joke, she used dramatic piano music and everything. The worst part? It worked. My phone buzzed the next morning with a blocked call. 2 men from Homeland Security wanted a word. When they showed up, suits sharp as razors, they didn't ask about the locker. They already knew what it was. What they wanted to know was how Karen got access to the photos and why her phone synced them to a civilian cloud. Turns out her selfie triggered a metadata match with a federal server index. That, my friends, was the real breach. I explained everything, showed the footage, pulled up the HOA emails, the sequence of alerts, the fact that Karen's phone had automatically uploaded restricted schematics to an unsecured network. The agents looked at each other like they'd just realized they'd uncovered a goldmine of suburban stupidity. One of them pulled out a tablet and started documenting everything. "If she uploaded those images from a synced phone," he said, "and that content was accessible to others, then we're looking at a civilian-triggered data leak. That's not just HOA drama, folks. That's a security violation. Felony level." The agent thanked me and left to follow up with the board. I watched them go, realizing Karen hadn't just stepped in it. She'd built a whole backyard pit and dived in head first. And she was still digging. That evening, Dennis posted a rant in the HOA group accusing me of weaponizing the federal government against private citizens, called me a snitch, said the real threat wasn't the locker, it was my connections in high places. I almost laughed. The same man who nodded quietly while Karen violated 3 federal statutes was now crying about consequences. But here's what snapped into focus for me right then. This wasn't about aesthetics anymore. It wasn't about HOA bylaws or storage placement. It was about fear. Fear of someone who knew how the system worked. Fear of someone who couldn't be bullied by clipboards and fake rules. That's when I started printing. Every screenshot, every complaint, every manipulated video clip, I labeled the binder defense. Not because I was scared, but because Karen had declared war. And if she wanted a war with someone who used to manage classified systems and layered security protocols for breakfast, well, she was going to need a bigger clipboard. So, if you've ever dealt with someone who confused power with permission, if you've ever watched a petty tyrant twist paperwork into punishment, do me a favor. Hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Because this isn't just a neighborhood meltdown anymore. Karen's bringing heavy machinery next. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when she shows up with a bulldozer at dawn. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with the low rumble of diesel at 5 in the morning and the gut-sinking realization that Karen wasn't bluffing anymore. I barely had one foot on the floor when I heard tires crush gravel and an engine grumble like it was mad to be awake. Outside my window, a flatbed truck squatted at the edge of my driveway, carrying enough equipment to take down a barn. Standing proudly in front of it, robes, sandals, flashlight in hand, was Karen, looking like a suburban Valkyrie ready to lead a raid. Next to her cousin, the same unlicensed contractor who turned our community garden into a glorified mud pie during the beautification project. He was already unloading a bulldozer, not figuratively, an actual loud, yellow rule-breaking bulldozer. Now let's pause and appreciate the stupidity here. Karen hadn't filed new paperwork, hadn't waited for a vote. She just woke up and decided today was demolition day. She was whispering into her phone, pacing, nodding like some HOA general giving field orders. I cracked my window and caught just enough. Before sunrise, no cameras active yet. He can't stop us if it's already gone. That was the plan. Rip it out before the world knew what hit it. What she didn't know, what she never seemed to learn, was that the locker wasn't just heavy metal. It was wired, motion-triggered, synced, and every time someone got frisky near it with power tools, it sent a ping to a short list of very serious people. Karen thought she was beating the system. All she did was start the clock on another federal visit. By the time I hit the lawn, Karen's cousin was revving up the bulldozer like it was some righteous parade float. I shouted, "You finally lose your mind, or are you just borrowing someone else's for the morning?" Karen flashed that sugary grin, the one that usually came right before a half apology wrapped in passive aggression. "This is HO land now," she yelled. The board voted that structure as abandoned hazardous equipment. We're removing it for safety. That sentence was impressive in how wrong every word managed to be. There was no vote. The land was mine, the locker wasn't abandoned, and safety was the last thing on her mind. As the bulldozer lurched forward, a sharp voice sliced through the early morning air like justice in uniform. "Stop the vehicle immediately and move away from the structure." I turned. 2 local officers were already crossing the yard. One had a flashlight. The other had his hand resting calmly on his sidearm. Karen froze. Her cousin killed the engine mid-growl. The officers walked over to the locker like they were checking on an old friend, then radioed something in. A minute later, another vehicle arrived. Not local this time. Base security. Military clipboard, badge, 0 patients. Names were collected, IDs scanned, statements taken. Karen tried to spin it, claimed she was just observing, that she didn't know her cousin was going to use the bulldozer. Her cousin folded like wet laundry. "She told me to yank it before the sun came up." The military officer didn't laugh, didn't blink, just stated with unnerving calm that tampering with federally monitored infrastructure was a violation under Title 50. Karen's eyes darted. She started blaming miscommunication and outdated bylaws, but the officer already had her emails. Thanks to a board member who'd turned whistleblower, they now had evidence of intent. That wasn't just HOA meddling anymore. That was premeditation. As all this unfolded, the neighborhood began to wake up. First a porch light, then two, then a dozen. Folks in slippers and coffee mugs trickled out like curious meerkats. They watched as the HOA president got questioned by police and military officials in her pajamas. Some filmed, some whispered. All of them knew this wasn't your average leaf blower complaint. When one officer opened the back of Karen's cousin's truck, he found a box of tools labeled under a fake company name. Another violation. The vehicle was impounded. The cousin? Detained on sight. Karen was told to stay on her porch until further notice. That afternoon, the community center was locked down by a federal team gathering HOA records, login histories, internal messages, metadata. You know, the kind of things folks usually delete when they think the law is a suggestion. What they found? Let's just say, Karen's HOA career didn't end with a bang. It ended with a bullet point list of federal offenses. She'd logged into the property registry database 3 times under board access. She'd used HOA credentials to run safety checks on residents. She'd even sent a memo about fining me into compliance. That same night, the board got a private meeting. Word got out fast. One by one, the members resigned. All except Karen, because she wasn't given the option. She was removed. Officially, unanimously, permanently. And just before she could let loose one of her righteous rants, a board member slid her a document, a list of statutes, timestamps, and violations with her name on every line. Her lips moved, but no words came. Only thing she managed to squeak out was, "I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." Protect it? Lady, you nearly flattened it. If you've ever seen someone turn their own ego into a wrecking ball, you'll know the look Karen wore that day. Shocked. Defeated. Confused that the rules applied to her too. And if you've ever dealt with someone like that, someone who weaponized a title, do me a favor, like this video, leave a comment, subscribe, because the story's not over yet, not even close. Next, Karen goes digital. And this time she's not just breaking bylaws, she's faking agencies. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how that backfires. You'd think that after getting humiliated in broad daylight by 2 cops, 3 military officers, and a neighborhood full of robe-wearing witnesses, Karen would have learned to sit down and shut up. But nah, Karen doesn't quit, she mutates. Less than 24 hours after her bulldozer backfire, I found a new letter taped to my front door. Not from the HOA, no logo, no legal stamp, just a flimsy printout with a generic Gmail address and the bold title, Community Safety Enforcement Final Warning. It accused me of everything from hoarding dangerous materials to disrupting visual harmony. Visual harmony. I live in a neighborhood where half the lawn flamingos look like they've been in a bar fight. But here's the kicker. This letter was from a so-called compliance agency that doesn't exist. I checked. No office, no website, no license. Just a name Karen made up to keep the fantasy going. I made a couple of calls. My contact at Federal Property Oversight confirmed what I suspected: there was no third-party agency tied to Maplewood Estates, which meant Karen had officially escalated from clipboard tyranny to fraud on federal turf. That same afternoon, I caught 2 HOA stragglers creeping along the edge of my yard with measuring tape and a drone. When I stepped out, one of them had the nerve to say, "We're just checking for easement violations." I raised an eyebrow and pointed at the locker. "You mean the one you all tried to bulldoze last week? The one under federal lock and seal?" He didn't respond, just turned red and stared at his sneakers. I could have called the cops again, but I didn't. Not yet. I was saving the big guns for something better. Because just a few hours later, the big guns showed up themselves. A dress, ununiformed military officer, and a legal liaison from the Judge Advocate General's Corps rang my doorbell. Now, I've worked with federal offices before. I know when a visit is friendly and when it's documentation. This was the second kind. They handed me a thick envelope, a formal cease and desist addressed to the entire HOA, citing obstruction, trespassing, and interference with protected infrastructure. It came with a bonus summary of legal actions that would be taken if the nonsense continued. I asked if they were just here for warnings or if it was already a case. The liaison didn't answer directly, but when he said, "We're reviewing past HOA digital activity for prosecutable evidence," I knew. This wasn't just about Karen anymore, this was about everyone who co-signed her madness. Word spread fast. By nightfall, the HOA group chat was doing what it did best, melting down. Some members were panicking. Others defended Karen with phrases like, "We didn't know," and "She said it was legal." Screenshots started leaking. Karen had been privately messaging the board, telling them to hold the line. She even wrote, "They can't arrest all of us." That right there is the language of a woman who knows the walls are closing in. The next morning, while I was going over security footage with my coffee, I saw a pickup truck back into my lawn again. Two men hopped out wearing work belts, hauling straps, and a mechanical winch. I stepped outside calmly and asked what they were doing. "We're here for a removal," one said. HOS said this was abandoned equipment. I pointed at the bright yellow sign bolted to the locker. Federal Property Warning, Title 50. "You missed the part where it says felony." They packed up faster than a raccoon caught in a kitchen. I called my JAG contact and gave them the plate number. Then I forwarded the footage, along with audio of the crew saying Karen called it in. This was attempted removal of secured federal property. We were past HOA antics. We were officially in federal court territory. That night a knock came at my door. This time it was Lucas, one of the quieter board members. He looked like a man who'd just walked out of a horror movie and realized he was holding the knife. "I didn't sign up for this," he said, eyes wide. He handed me a folder full of internal emails. In them, Karen not only confirmed her fake agency stunt, but also outlined a plan to financially squeeze me into submission. She joked about turning my locker into a toy war box. Meltdown. Lucas apologized. I thanked him. Then I made 3 copies and sent them straight to the legal office downtown. So now, Karen wasn't just on thin ice, she was breakdancing on it with a blowtorch. And if you've ever dealt with someone who thinks power equals immunity, you already know where this is going. So, hit that like button, drop a comment if you've ever had your own Karen story, and don't forget to subscribe, because next time, the feds go public, and Karen learns the hard way what happens when the government starts pulling receipt. You'd think that after federal letters, legal threats, and a whole binder of damning evidence, Karen would finally retreat into some kind of dignified silence. But Karen doesn't do dignity. She does denial with a splash of delusion. By the weekend, she was back on the neighborhood sidewalks like nothing had happened. Clipboard in hand, fake smile locked in place, waving at neighbors who were clearly debating whether to wave back or call animal control. And just when you thought the show couldn't get any weirder, Karen taped another letter to my door, this time from a new agency, equally fake, equally Gmail-based, this time citing violations for non-cooperative attitude during safety checks. If irony paid rent, Karen's nonsense would have bought her a mansion. Then came the real turning point. Homeland Security showed up again. Not the polite suit and tie version. This time they arrived with a forensic tech unit and a warrant for HOA data access. Turns out that little cloud sync Karen accidentally triggered when she took a selfie with my locker had connected to a sensitive federal server, a server currently supporting an active cybersecurity operation. And when Karen's photo hit that server, it caused a temporary data scrub that nearly compromised the program. The liaison told me this wasn't just a federal violation anymore. It was now flagged as a national security event. All because Karen couldn't resist playing Nancy Drew with bolt cutters and bad judgment. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was in chaos. The HOA group chat imploded with arguments, accusations, and panicked apologies. People started turning on each other like it was a reality show reunion episode. Some blamed Karen, some blamed Dennis, a few blamed me, saying I should just move the locker. But you don't move a federally registered locker any more than you move a courthouse because someone thinks it ruins the view. Then came the digital avalanche. More leaked emails, including one where Dennis called me a military snitch, and another where Karen wrote, "He thinks the Constitution will save him. Let's teach him otherwise." I forwarded both to the JAG office and watched the legal engine hum into motion. The final straw came early one morning when another contractor crew showed up unannounced. Not a removal team this time, a camera crew, allegedly sent to document dangerous storage conditions. The guy in charge claimed he was filming a segment for a local HOA safety awareness series. One call to my contact at the liaison office revealed the entire operation was bogus. Karen had staged the whole thing, complete with rented equipment and a script. And because she used HOA funds to pay for it, yep, you guessed it, embezzlement was now on the table. That same afternoon, I was called to a secure location where 2 federal agents laid out what had been uncovered. Karen had violated at least 6 federal regulations, including misuse of administrative privileges, tampering with protected property, and obstructing a federally secured site. Oh, and that fake compliance agency she'd dreamed up, the domain was linked to her personal IP address. By Sunday, it was official. Karen had gone from HOA president to federal defendant. The board was dissolved, the HOA temporarily placed under review by external legal auditors, and a special election was announced. But Karen? She refused to go quietly. She posted one last manifesto on the neighborhood forum, warning that the government was in bed with rogue homeowners and that her removal was unconstitutional. No one responded. Not a like, not a comment, just silence. Because by then everyone had finally realized what I knew from the beginning. Karen wasn't leading a community. She was running a one-woman coup. And when you take on federal law with flyers and fantasies, you don't just lose the vote. You lose the whole house. If you've ever seen someone fall on their own sword, sharpen it in public, and then blame the blade, you know exactly what this feels like. So, if you're still with me, hit that like button, leave a comment about the wildest HOA moment you've ever seen, and don't forget to subscribe, because next time, Karen's name hits the court docket, and poetic justice finally shows up with paperwork. Karen's fall didn't come with handcuffs and headlines. It came with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that tiptoes in after something big collapses. You could feel it walking through the neighborhood. No more citation slips under wiper blades. No more drones buzzing overhead like budget surveillance. No one marching the sidewalks with a camera and a grudge. The HOA wasn't just gone, it had evaporated, and for the first time in months, people started making eye contact again. One neighbor waved with an actual smile. Another brought over banana bread. I wasn't naive. I knew they weren't all innocent, but even the quiet ones had learned something. When power stops answering to logic, it turns on everyone. Blitz Karen had other plans. News spread fast once her cousin was officially held for questioning over unlicensed contracts and multiple trespassing violations. Homeland Security issued Karen a federal summons within the week. Turns out, her fake compliance letters, database breaches, and unauthorized surveillance crossed the threshold from petty to prosecutable. She triggered an audit that linked her to a previous cybersecurity complaint in a nearby community, and that's when everything went nuclear. Her name was now in the system twice, and the second hit pushed her case into full-on national review. The irony? Karen, queen of HOA order and holiday decoration fines, was now facing real charges for crimes that started with a selfie and a bolt cutter. Meanwhile, I got an unexpected invitation, not to court, to consult. A group of government officials called me in to a secure location to debrief the entire fiasco. Turns out when you successfully de-escalate a neighborhood standoff without picking up a shovel or a lawsuit, they notice. I was offered a remote contract position, part-time civilian infrastructure compliance consultant. Basically, I'd be the guy making sure other neighborhoods didn't end up with their own Karen situation. It was poetic. I didn't need the job, but I accepted it. Not for the money. for the principle. Because if one more clipboard dictator thought they could bulldoze their way through federal protocols, they were going to have to explain it to someone who already survived one suburban war zone. The neighborhood transformed. We held a special election for a new HOA board, this time without Karen's shadow looming over the ballot. A retired firefighter was voted president, and the first order of business was striking down the absurd bylaw Karen had twisted into her personal sledgehammer. When the motion passed unanimously, I didn't clap. I just nodded and watched the smiles ripple across the room. No more weaponized bylaws, no more fear, just common sense, something we hadn't seen in a long time. Karen didn't show up. She wasn't allowed. After pleading guilty behind closed doors, she was slapped with hefty fines, restricted digital access, and banned from any housing board for the next 15 years. Her name? Wiped from the neighborhood newsletter like she'd never existed. A week later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just a note inside. "You were right. I should have listened. I lost everything." No signature. But I recognized the handwriting. It matched the welcome note Karen left me when I first moved in. Before the power, before the bulldozers, before she tried to rewrite law with attitude and a Sharpie. I didn't keep it out of sentiment. I kept it as a reminder of how fast control becomes corruption when it stops listening. The locker? Still there. Still sealed, still connected to the same alert system that kicked off the whole thing. But now it had a new sign beneath the federal tag, a plaque that read, "Stand here if you've read the Constitution." People laugh when they see it. Kids ask questions, and every so often a neighbor will pause, read the sign, and nod because now they know what happens when someone tries to rewrite the rules and ends up losing the whole game. If this story made you smile, grit your teeth, or feel that satisfying tingle called justice, then you know what to do. Like, comment with your wildest HOA tale, and hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. And if you ever face your own Karen with a clipboard and a bulldozer, just remember, the locker always wins.